The Colt 1911, the incredible gun in service for 100 years by Sideprojects, owned by Simon Whistler. Fact boy, if you will.
Today's video is sponsored by Crossout, a totally free-to-play vehicle shooter game where players build their own vehicle and pit it against other players' creations. Brilliant. Now, Crossout isn't one of those supposedly customizable games where it's like, yeah, you can build your own vehicle. You absolutely can. If by build your own vehicle, we mean select one of our pre-built vehicles and then choose the ammunition. No.
I think that's a very good distinction, though, at the very least, because there was a lot of games like, oh, fully customizable, fully immersive, change what you want to, and it's just a few stock models. And you get to, yes, equip it with certain cannons, certain guns, certain ammunition types, right? You can change certain factors about it, but ultimately it is still the same. So that does stick out to me as a good clarification.
This is a totally customizable game. Players build their own combat vehicle from the ground up. You choose a frame. It's literally just a frame. Sometimes it's just a piece of metal that is like a rectangle. And then you get to add everything else yourself. Drivetrains, support systems, paint jobs, and of course, the all-important weaponry. Want to cover the backside with a chainsaw? Yes! How about Gatling guns on either side? A crossbow on top? Yes! Build it well, you will dominate. Build it badly, and you will get dominated. No, it just won't work. Like you built it, but you didn't include an engine. It's not going to work. It's a super fast-paced game with lots of different game modes, including PvP, PvE raids, and also you've got pretty much limitless freedom to create. One thing I like about Crossout is it's not super complicated. I don't spend a lot of time getting into games like super deep. I just like getting in and playing games, and Crossout is super accessible from the start.
I think, and the fact that as a Destiny player, there has definitely been that part of the community that goes, oh, this game shouldn't be accessible. You need to work for your stuff. You need to earn your stuff. And it's like, man, I take people through Vault of Glass Road Nightmares all the time. I prefer you have basic mechanical understanding. Okay, there's a little bit of a difference there. But I mean, realistically, I think that when we start talking about games in a generalized sense, and Simon Whistler brings up a good point, sometimes there's people that just want to hop in for a couple matches. They just want to play. They want to have fun. They want to enjoy themselves. Not every game has to be this proverbial Dark Souls, nose to the grindstone, level 1 Dark Eater Madeir, grind fest. It doesn't have to be that way. Not every game should be that way. Absolutely, we need to be applauding people that can, solo dungeons, that can solo raids, that can do a level 1 Dark Eater Madeir run in Dark Souls 3, right? Absolutely, we can celebrate that. But for that to be used and weaponized against just your average player, I don't necessarily agree with. So I know it's part of an ad read. Don't get me wrong. I understand that. I just thought this was a perfect opportunity to draw on my understanding of the situation and my experience that games should absolutely be accessible. Hard to master, easy to learn, that kind of thing, right?
Just fire it up, easy, you're good to go. There's no learning the ropes, just immediate gameplay. And if you do want to play games longer, there's tons of extra stuff you can get into. I'm yet to explore that because I just like playing quick games. Best of all, it's totally free to play, available PC, Xbox One, or PS4, so lots of different options. Just go to xo.link/xo Sideprojects to get a free bonus starter set with 3 extra weapons or a vehicle cabin. Very cool. Thank you, Crossout. And now today's video.
So, ad read, a little long, clocking at about 1:43. That being said, if you have seen any of Simon Whistler's other channels, and this is not a bad critique by any means, if you've seen any Simon Whistler's other channels, if you have seen, something like Mega Projects, if you've seen Casual Criminalist, if you have seen Business Blaze, I'm sorry, it's what is it now? It's not Business Blaze anymore. Allegedly, it's I think it's The Blaze now, right? I think it's The Blaze. Oh my God, Business Blaze was off the rails. This is pretty par for the course. Business Blaze, when Danny Salter writes the scripts, is like 15 minutes for an introduction. It is off the rails and right up my alley. Do yourself a favor, if you haven't checked out Simon Whistler, go ahead and check him out. But yes, no, a little bit of a long ad read, but it's pretty par for the course for the creator. And you also have to understand that sometimes advertiser agencies and stuff like that, sometimes they will demand a certain amount of time, whether that's 60 seconds, 80 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, right? And from a YouTube metric standpoint, someone that has to deal with metrics, right? You do want to make sure your first 30 seconds is pretty engaging. That's going to be where most of your people, because there's arguing people that have clicked off from this, alone, right? This 4 minutes approximately that we're almost into this. And just things to consider if you're looking at YouTube and, you having to make sure to fit in a sponsor and also having to fit it in a way that it's compact enough, but filling the requirements enough. And honestly, I mean, if he enjoys the game, absolutely. I love that he's promoting a project that he not only enjoys, but is sponsoring him. So I have nothing but respect for it. 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 for the ad read, but generally fairly good. I try to, on here, go over some of the ad reads, give a little bit of feedback, give my little critiques on them, but overall, very good ad read.
If you were asked to list the greatest inventors in world history, who would come to mind first?
Literally, with that question, I already hear the comments. John Moses Browning, right? I already hear it.
Maybe Leonardo da Vinci, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla. Although those juggernauts of innovation are unquestionably worth our time and attention, one of the greatest inventor minds of all time often slips under the radar, even though his inventions are known by billions around the world. John Moses Browning was a genius who single-handedly evolved human combat.
The man, the myth, the absolute legend.
Born to a middle-class merchant and inventor in the newly established Utah Territory as one of 22 children in a polyamorous Mormon household, this self-taught inventor would move from the small-town blacksmith to the US military's personal weapon designer. Our recent video on the M2 machine gun highlights just one example of his incredible design prowess, so check that out if you want to see another of his influential designs.
Sideprojects as a channel, I will add, is definitely a channel with some really cool stuff on it. Stuff like the 1911, stuff like the M2. So if you are coming across this for the first time, I do absolutely recommend that you go and check out Sideprojects, because there is a lot of cool stuff, and mega projects as well. A lot of Simon Whistler's channel network has some really cool stuff on it.
He designed so many weapons used by soldiers in the last century that many books can, and indeed have, been written about them. However, one of his inventions definitely stands above the rest. The Colt M1911 semi-automatic handgun forever changed firearms. Acting as the standard issue handgun in all branches of the US military for almost the entirety of the 20th century, it saw combat in every conflict from World War I to Kuwait. Aside from being one of the deadliest weapons of all time, it was also the first widespread and reliable semi-automatic handgun, and it has been the template of which nearly all modern firearms have been based off.
Yeah, you can definitely see some isms taking from the 1911 and other things. You can absolutely see it. And that being said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If it just works, it just works. If it works, it ain't stupid.
This singular invention has had a huge impact on firearms and war, and one man made all of it a reality.
Yeah.
Born in 1855, John Moses Browning was surrounded by firearms basically from birth. His father was a blacksmith and gun designer who had previously achieved modest wealth by inventing one of the earliest rifles with a multi-shot magazine. Although his design wouldn't see huge proliferation, it was successful enough in the Wild West of the 19th century of America to make sure that the large family wouldn't struggle. Browning worked in his father's workshop starting at the age of 7 and learned quickly. He was an excellent student and was awarded his high school diploma early, supposedly after the teacher of his one-room schoolhouse said that she had already taught him everything she knew.
What an absolute Chad. And that's where I think that, we can get into a conversation about standardization of education as a whole, right? There are people like Browning in modern day that will be able to do something just so second nature. There are people that can absolutely run circles around me in calculus. Okay, I had to take calculus in high school. I absolutely failed. I got a 58. But there are people, kids in high school today that could absolutely run circles around me in calculus. I might be able to have some form of speaking ability, right? There are people that would absolutely just wipe the floor with me from anything they could bring up in a debate class. But, we all have our specialties and we all have our shortcomings, right? Someone that's incredibly good at calculus might not be good at social sciences or plant sciences. I almost said agriculture. It's such an Idahoism. But, things like that, right? Or if you're good at, debate, maybe you're not necessarily good at, things like geometry. You're maybe good at algebra. When we get geometry involved or math analysis involved, you just kind of crumble. We all have our specializations and we all have our shortcomings. So clearly, John Browning here, right, is just next level in certain aspects. And I'm sure he has shortcomings as well. But the environment, literally his teacher saying that she had taught him everything that she knew is a passing of the torch, so to speak, in that you are clearly highly intelligent. You are absolutely next level. And it is up to parents really to catch that. What are you interested in? What interests have you? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And to help nourish a child. And that's where I think, we have a lot of very, very highly intelligent, highly capable people kind of just getting put to the wayside. In education, it almost seems like people in the class that either apathetic and don't care, or they just don't want to do the work, they're kind of the ones that the class is being catered around and being catered towards. And I have nothing but respect for teachers, do not get me wrong. It's more of a product of the environment and the system rather than a teacher issue. And parents definitely have to put out some work as well too there. But no, this is a prime example of sometimes you just have that kid, just have that student that's got that spark, that's got that gift, and he's given the ability to just run with it. As a formerly special gifted kid, now as an adult with just, I'm a VTuber on the internet, let's put it that way.
He apprenticed with his father for several years, but eventually his skills surpassed the older Brownings. He sold one of his inventions to Winchester in 1878, further solidifying his financial security. It also started his relationship with the US Army that would prove to be the most important business relationship of his career. By the 1890s, Browning was one of the go-to names in gun design. Whether it was for Colt, Remington, Winchester, or the US government, if a simple but effective design was needed, John Browning was the man to talk to. His 1886 rework of an iconic Winchester lever-action rifle unquestionably cemented his position as the greatest weapon designer in the world at the time.
I think there's absolutely room for over-designed firearms. I think there's absolutely room for things that are over-tuned, that are not simplistic. I absolutely think it. I mean, you can look at things like, I don't know, Shaytak M200 intervention, right? Pretty spendy piece of equipment there. I mean, fairly, as far as I'm aware, fairly straightforward platform, but something like that, one could argue, is maybe over-designed, or it's maybe a little eccentric even. You can look at something like the Smith & Wesson Governor, right? Where you have a cylinder, you can put 410, was it? I think the 410 shells. Yeah, the little 410 shells in it. Or you can put Colt 45 in it. Or if you have the moon clips, you can put 45 ACP in that thing. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of a meme. It's kind of a party trick, so to speak, right? But, if you just need something that works, sometimes that's all that's needed. Yes, both of these have their merits. You can have like the WA 2000, something I would one day love to own, but those are way too expensive, and there's a limited quantity of them in the world, right? So something like the WA 2000 that you can go, oh, I see the attempt that was made here. This is a really cool platform. I like it, actually. Versus something like a 1911 where it's just like, oh man, this is simple and I love it. It's heavy. It's the brick and I love it. Apparently, variations of those as well. There was a company back, I think it was in the 1980s, Llama. So some of you in chat probably know what I'm talking about, Llama. And apparently they were just really heavy. They were really angular and edgy. You had to take a file to those things. Oh God, I'm so sad they're out of business now. I would have loved to see what their 1911 looks like.
However, the world had drastically changed since Browning started designing weapons. His biggest customer, the US military, had just engaged in a conflict unlike any that it had previously taken part in.
World War I?
The Philippine-American War
No, never mind.
is often an overlooked part of American history that had a larger impact on America than many people realize. The tactics, strategies, and tools that they used in that conflict set the stage for World War I. One of the many revelations that the war revealed was how outdated many of the standard issue firearms were. The Colt New Army M1892 was the new standard issue sidearm for soldiers. Being significantly smaller and lighter than the Smith & Wesson Model No. 3 Schofield it was replacing, many soldiers were glad for a few less pounds to carry in the sweltering Philippine landscape.
This is so strange to consider, because then again, I mean, to be fair, in a world of Modern Warfare 2, in a world of movies, John Wick, that kind of thing, and, just modern American military, right? And things they have issued, right? M16s, M4 platforms. I think that, what are they on? They're not on the Glock platform. What is the Army on? I think the Marines are on the 1911 still. I don't remember what the Army's on. Someone in the comments, please clarify that. I don't actually know what the U.S. Army uses right now. But I mean, it's just so wild to consider that a lot of the world is on Glocks now, which is magazine fed, or Berettas, which are magazine fed, or still 1911s, which are still magazine fed, right? And I'm so used to just this metric volume by fire, looking at like MP5, MP40, right? Things like that. And it's wild for me to really just look back in time and consider that there was a time that, maybe 6 shots was all you had before you had to really reload. And even then, we evolved from this into the M1 Garand, which in itself was an absolute beast, which really pulled its weight in the battlefield. Absolutely. So it's wild to just consider how far we've come and just how much more lead we can put down range.
However, this lower weight came with a serious drawback too. A much smaller cartridge. For the last half of the 20th century or more, all military sidearms have been 44 or 45 caliber pistols. At nearly 12 millimeters, they were very large rounds with incredible stopping power. Even the toughest enemy combatants could be stopped by a round or two from these devastating sidearms.
Right.
On the contrary, the M1892 fired a 38 caliber bullet that came in a hair over 9 millimeters and with significantly less powder behind the rounds. The soldiers found that this was a devastating drawback because even well-placed rounds did not guarantee neutralizing an enemy combatant.
Right.
Also, many of their Philippine adversaries would use copious drugs with analgesic effects to eliminate pain, even placing
whenever I hear about this, whenever I hear about just an enemy unit that is on something, I think to Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, Phalion from the Dark Brotherhood questline, when he is jacked up on skooma, because you can like paralyze him, right, or put him to sleep. He'll fall to the floor, but the moment you attack him, just that skooma just starts rushing right to his head. He'll just jump up and he just starts punching you at like 2x speed. Man is absolutely just off the rails.
6 rounds on a target wasn't a guarantee that the threat would be neutralized. Since soldiers using a sidearm were already resorting to a secondary or tertiary weapon, this was entirely unacceptable.
Well, it's also interesting to consider as well that the U.S. specifically more or less adopted the, not necessarily policy, but the ideology of, accuracy by volume of fire. Why would you make one 50 AE, caliber round when you could make like 3 to 4 9mm rounds, right? And why would you have, 7, maybe 6 plus 1, right? Why would you have 7 rounds of 50 AE versus up to 15 9mm in double, especially modern 9mm, which has really closed that gap between that and 45 ACP. I think 45 ACP from a logistical standpoint has a slight edge, but it really comes down to whatever you prefer, as far as I'm aware, or whatever you are given and or assigned to have. So it's just very interesting that going to a smaller round was seen as a bad thing, and that's where in 1911 comes in with the 45 ACP. But now we've kind of done that again, where we've gone to smaller rounds. And I guess that's kind of like a standard thing, right? We've gone to smaller rounds again, but that's kind of seen as a good thing. I think it's just because we're using that concept, but technology has evolved in such a way that we can actually use it as a benefit from a logistical side of things, right? Very interesting.
Once again, Browning was the man who was called to fix the issue and to ask to work with legendary firearm manufacturer Colt, who would handle their production. He was given a set of very ambitious requests by top military brass. Firstly, and most importantly, the round was to be chambered in nothing smaller than a 45 caliber. This was to alleviate the stopping power issue faced by smaller rounds. However, this was the lesser request. They also wanted the gun to be a fully functional and reliable semi-automatic pistol. After having supplied the US military with a fully automatic machine gun for the Spanish-American War a few years earlier, they had confidence they'd be up to the task. However, semi-automatic and automatic weapons were just in their infancy. For those unacquainted with the technology, semi-automatic refers to a firearm that automatically loads a subsequent live round ready to be fired with the action of firing the previous shot. Although double-action revolvers could sometimes allow someone to fire 6 shots in a row without reloading, that was simply due to the mechanism of the cylinder chambering the next round.
Right.
In semi-automatic weapons, the energy produced in the recoil or from gas expansion in the barrel is utilized to chamber the next round. Importantly, the trigger has to be pulled individually each time a round was to be fired, unlike their fully automatic counterparts in which the trigger could continue to stay depressed for continued fire. This design.
So I'm gonna put YouTube in the proverbial crosshairs on this one. YouTube, man, reviewer that I was going to have to review this. What about your fully semi-automatic thing that you put out in your policy, right? Everyone in chat is like, Kip, what are you talking about fully semi-automatic? Definitely look it up. Google it. YouTube had an entire thing where in regard to claiming certain content, in regard to updated policies, any fully semi-automatic firearm. YouTube, can I get a clear and concise explanation on that, please? Thank you in advance.
It offered numerous advantages to troops. Firstly, reloading was extremely quick. Even though the military had long moved away from muzzle-loading firearms, revolvers still had to have their rounds slotted into each of the 6 chambers before they could continue firing. And
I don't think speed loaders were a thing at this period in time. I mean, I would absolutely love to be proven wrong or shown citation that they did have speed loaders. But yeah, you're going to have to slot every single round into each of, the holes in the cylinder.
And then they would have to repeat the process 6 rounds later. Semi-automatics could utilize a magazine system that would allow for a preloaded magazine to just slip into the firearm and continue to fire after a few seconds. In the field of battle, every second was precious, and cutting down...
I mean, I guess that works for loading. I've always had my slide open when I've done that. So I jam the magazine in, pull the slide, or pull the back of the slide so it goes forward. I don't know. I guess that works, though. I don't know. It's so strange. I go to the range so seldom that, I don't know. I just picked up some, I'm safe about everything I do. Absolutely. I just don't know. I just don't really do that, I guess.
on the extremely vulnerable task of reloading was invaluable. Another advantage was the rate of fire of the weapon. Although revolvers could be fired very quickly, just see any Old West movie where the protagonist feathers the hammer to empty his revolver quickly, this plummeted the shooter's accuracy. The unmanaged recoil meant that soldiers had to re-steady the firearm and re-aim in order to take an accurate follow-up shot, and anyone feathering the hammer would be lucky to hit the broadside of a barn, since aiming was impossible while completing the maneuver.
Really, it is just a slower... It's just slower warfare, right? Your tempo is so large because there is so much time that it takes for you to do the action versus, having something like a magazine-fed system like the 1911 that you're able to... Yes, you have technically one more shot, right? Depending on what revolver you compare it to. Yes, 6 plus... yes, no, 7 plus 1, right? Yeah, you have more rounds in the 1911, but you also don't have to worry about, popping the cylinder out, popping new rounds in every time, and then, popping it back in, going to town again, right? It's all in that magazine. Plus, for storage sake, you can have 20 magazines on you. Absolutely. Eject it, put in another one, you're good to keep going.
The design was clever enough, channeling the energy that was released by the bullet as it fired to operate the action of the gun. It had the...
I have never seen this. I've never seen that thumb placement. But I guess it works.
Bonus effect of keeping the firearm much more level by better managing recoil and allowing for extremely fast follow-up shots, especially if the firearm was heavy and able to further dampen the recoil. However, this new style of weapon was not without its drawbacks. Semi-automatics were extremely rare at the time and just as fragile. German firearms manufacturer Mauser had released its Mauser C96 pistol, better known as the broom handle, just a few years before. Although it is iconic in its own right for its beautiful design and also as the inspiration for Han Solo's antecedently firing sidearm, it was an unreliable disaster. It shot beautifully as long as it was perfectly clean and all the rounds were made within unimaginably strict tolerances.
But the moment you didn't have that round, oh boy.
As soon as the action was exposed to any dirt or a slightly imperfect round, the whole gun jammed, making it little better than the broom handle it was named after. This made it practically unusable on the battlefield. Back across the pond, Browning had just finished designing and selling his first semi-automatic shotgun, the Browning Auto 5. This was a functional and robust weapon, but was heavy and also large enough to handle the shotgun shells with sturdier components in the large full-sized action. He had also released the first semi-automatic pistol for the consumer market, chambered in .38 in 1900, but as previously mentioned, that caliber was significantly less powerful and many of the components would be obliterated by the far larger .45 caliber round.
But you see where the 1911 kind of is starting, the inspiration for some of it at the very least, is starting to come from. It's very fascinating to see this design evolve.
This meant that Browning was near square one again. Although he knew how to make semi-automatic firearms, he had been one of their inventors after all, this was still a unique challenge. He needed a more powerful gun that was reliable in all circumstances. It had to be the more powerful .45 caliber, but robust enough to handle the abuse of firing thousands of rounds.
Yeah.
It needed many moving parts, but had to be simple enough to be serviced by soldiers in the field. However, he already thought he had some solutions to these problems. The first issue was finding a cartridge in at least .45 caliber that would be reliable in the more finicky semi-automatic actions. One of the biggest advantages of revolvers is that they can easily fire poorly made rounds of aluminium fairly well, an enormous benefit in the early and haphazard days of individual self-contained cartridges. There were more than enough options to pick from. The most famous gun of all time to that point in history, the Colt single-action army revolver, was chambered in the bone-rattling .45 long Colt cartridge. You could take a look at our video on that weapon if you want a closer look at it. This legendary
Colt 45 just sounds like it packs a punch. I haven't gotten any of that yet. I haven't had the chance to actually deal with Colt 45. Oh my god, though, that is a round.
sidearm was notorious for its incredible power, but the round was too long. Since the action would need to pull each round from the magazine and into the chamber, a long round would bulk up the whole gun significantly.
So the thought process at that point becomes, how do you have something as powerful as, long Colt 45, and small enough to function in a handheld platform like the eventual 1911, right? Realistically, is there a way, hypothetically, if you will, at this point in time, to shorten that round? And thus, this is where we're getting the eventual 45 ACP.
He looked at several other pre-existing cartridges, but all of them were deficient in some way or another. Just as he would do in less than a decade with the M2 machine gun, he developed his own brand new cartridge for the gun. The .45 caliber automatic Colt pistol, 45 ACP, was created specifically for the new gun that it was being designed alongside. As powerful as it was stout, this new round was naturally a perfect fit.
So the danger with that, I mean, especially if it is, for all intents and purposes, like now it's native standard, it's a standardized round, right? But back then, especially if it's a proprietary round that's being supplied, it has to go into consideration to award the weapon the contract or not. Like it's like the 277 Fury that's going to be replacing 5.56 in, I believe it's the Army, right? Like, just how much of a logistical nightmare that kind of is, because it's not a standardized round. You can find 5.56, 7.62, 9mm, 45 ACP, I think 30-06, and 308 as well, because they're all standardized rounds, and thus the logistics on that are a little easier. But if you go over something like 277 Fury, where you have, I think it's one manufacturer making it, you might run into bottlenecking issues and just a logistical nightmare. Same thing back then, where if the weapon has to really just be immaculate, considering it is a proprietary round at that time.
With the issue of the cartridge sorted, the rest of the weapon fell into place around it. The final design is one that will look familiar to nearly everyone with firearms experience or who has played any military shooter game video released since 2007. Even if you hadn't seen or heard of the Colt M1911 before today, its shape and design are likely familiar to you because it has become the benchmark for nearly every semi-automatic pistol since its release.
It really
From the
has.
magazine bearing handle, the underbarrel receiver spring, to the integrated grip safety, basically every modern sidearm takes some cues from this design. However, iconic looks were not the chief concern of the US military. They had to put it through its paces and make sure that it would hold up to the rigors of warfare.
And that's the thing, is that's what you look for, is yes, this looks cool. And I think more people need to be thinking about that, right? Oh, this new gaming console looks cool. Oh, this new graphics card line series looks cool. Oh, this new round looks cool. Okay, but how does it actually function? How does it work? Does it have issues? Does it brick? Does it have any manufacturer issues? Is it getting recalled? Is it works 99% of the time, but that 1% of the time, if it doesn't work, it just absolutely just craps the bed? These are all things you don't have to be a firearms expert or someone into firearms to look at. Just things that you buy on a regular basis, right? You buy something from Amazon and you're just like, okay. You're looking at it, okay, is this going to do what it needs to do? Or is it just going to crap out after 2 weeks? Is it going to be for the long term? Am I buying this for the long term? Am I buying this as a short term solution? These are all considerations that a lot of us need to be making. And so you don't need a long, laborious process. Just kind of look at something, go, does this make sense? Yes, no, right? That kind of thing. In regards to awarding the military contract to the firearms of this era, and any military contract being awarded to a firearms manufacturer, absolutely, there's going to be some rigorous testing involved. And so that's a little different.
And it actually didn't cut muster on its first outing. Although the weapon was impressive, there were still issues with reliability that needed to be sorted before its wide adoption by the US military. There was also some worry within the company since Colt was in competition with Stevens, another American firearms manufacturer who had developed their own .45 caliber pistol and had hoped to land the lucrative military contract. In 1910, the final competition was held. Although a great Hollywood depiction of the event could raise the stakes by showing a nail-biting competition with many trials and tribulations, it mostly involved military higher-ups shooting the gun in different circumstances to see how it coped with them. In the end, Browning's design came out victorious. It was officially adopted by the US Army on the 29th of March 1911 and officially given its now iconic designation of the Colt M1911.
Nice.
With tensions starting to rise in Europe, it was immediately put into production. But with the Americans' hesitancy to become involved in the European conflict, it wasn't mass-produced. The current plan was to slowly integrate it into the forces until it was the standard issue across all branches of military. However, this wasn't to be. The European conflict exploded from small regional disputes into the First World War.
Yeah. One thing led to another. Yeah. Which an important part of that, which there's a lot of misunderstanding, is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was, yes, it was the tinder that started World War I, but it was not the sole cause for that. That was a number of other factors like the Triple Entente. We have, alliances at that era, just everyone just chomping at the bit. And so you have the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which I feel is often wrongly attributed as the sole factor to why World War I kicked off. It is a inciting incident, if not the inciting incident, that lit that entire tinderbox. But it wasn't the only thing. Just one of those things that I had to actually clarify in regards to chatting with some education professionals that I knew in regards to, okay, was this actually this, or was there something else going on? Because my Idaho education does not do me any favors at times.
When the US joined the conflict on the side of the Allied powers in 1917, there were less than 70,000 of the pistols produced. This was a trend with American arms and equipment at the time. Their borderline isolationist policies had left America unprepared for a major conflict. With the first wave of troops in June 1917, only 14,000 Americans landed in Europe. This ramped up drastically in both troops and weaponry. By the end of the war, almost 650,000 of the sidearms had been manufactured and acquired by the US military. Unlike its predecessor, the M1911 was a perfect fit. It had checked every single box that the US Army had asked for and somehow exceeded all of the expectations. The weapon had incredible stopping power, was easy to service and maintain, and could handle massive amounts of abuse while still functioning perfectly. Any doubts that may have lingered in the minds of top brass were completely dispelled. It served with distinction in the war and was immediately integrated as an essential part of the service kit for troops. Even once the conflict was over in 1918, many soldiers had already become accustomed to the weapon and wanted one at home, and there were plenty available. When America entered World War II in 1941, they didn't have the issue of slow production that had plagued the US in World War I. Nearly 3 million M1911s were sent with every American troop to every corner of the globe. From Iwo Jima to Normandy, the pistol followed practically every single soldier through the tragedy, triumph, and everything in between. If the gun was not an icon before, well, it certainly was now. Further adding to its popularity was the fact that other iconic weapons of the conflict, such as the Thompson submachine gun or the Browning automatic rifle, were illegal for civilian possessions, unless they were modified to be semi-automatic. However,
I wonder how that stacks up today. Because, and it's come up a number of times in the comment section about, Kip, we really need to get you up to date on firearm laws and civilian firearm laws and regulations. Oh, absolutely, 100%. Like, that is something that I will myself say that I am a little underversed on. I knew more than enough that I got the Strybog. I can't remember who makes it. It was the Strybog platform. I had to take that brace off that because at the time I bought it, it was fine. But obviously overnight you can't have a brace on anything like that. Naturally, I take that off for compliance sake. I don't need anybody to you don't need to go to a range and have somebody getting a little fit over. Why do you have this? And it's just like, look, I'm just here to live my life. I'm gonna let all you guys sort this out. But no, absolutely. I tried to be as up to date as I can, but in regards to certain paperwork, certain classifications, etc., that is still just absolutely foreign to me. And an automatic Browning from this, I know it is before 1970, and certain automatic weapons before 1970 can be owned by civilians in certain situations. After 1970 is a little bit different. There's a whole rabbit hole on it. If you're looking for a YouTube rabbit hole, U.S. firearm restrictions and regulations. That is your YouTube rabbit hole.
However, the M1911 was legal for nearly everyone. Anyone who wanted a piece of iconic and ubiquitous war history could walk down to their local sporting goods store and pull one off the shelf for a modest price. This wasn't the end of the M1911's military service record, though. It continued to be carried on the side of troops through the Korean conflict, Vietnam War, and anywhere else American troops could be found in the middle part of the 20th century. At this point, the M1911 has been the sidearm for 4 generations of troops who served in conflicts that were wildly different. A kid learning to shoot with his father's service pistol would be issued his own when he went into field to fight against a new enemy. Soldiers could assemble and disassemble the weapon blindfolded. The highest ranks of military command would still be seen with the weapon as it was when they carried one when they first joined the service all those years ago. However, this incredible run wouldn't last forever. Although the pistol was functioning as excellently as ever, some innovations in firearms design had started to make the old stalwart of the military show its age by the 1980s. The largest of these criticisms was that it was heavy. At over a kilogram unloaded, the weapon was a behemoth, since the rest of a soldier's gear combined floated.
That's actually, I don't know what that is. Is that a Europeanism? Because he's saying behemoth, and that's how at least I pronounce it in the States, right? Stateside US, it's behemoth. But I've never, until I started listening to some, like, is it European? Is it specifically UK? I don't understand what it is. I'm very curious on what this is part of, if that makes sense. What brand of English that is a part of and comes from, because I had to scratch my head a few times when he said this word. It's very fascinating to me.
At around 50 kilograms, and with its large ammunition further weighing down soldiers, some questioned its practicality. Another criticism was the low magazine size. Although innovations in design had seen the pistol go from a 7+1 in the chamber to an 8+1 design, it was still on the low end. The newly introduced M16 assault rifle used banana clips of 30 rounds with far larger.
So, okay, like, I thought AR was Armalite. I thought it was the Armalite platform. So I'm going to open up this. I'm not going to open it up for a political debate. I want to open up that I was under the impression that assault rifle was the incorrect term, and that it in fact was an Armalite rifle. It's one of those, I think that it comes down to the people that know will say it one way, but the people that don't know, or just for a generalized audience, whether they do or don't know, it's known as the other, right? We see this in a lot of things, right? If you happen to, right? People, what's DS2? Oh, Dark Souls 2, another person, Dead Space 2, right? Which one's going to be more popular in pop culture, right? I think most people are going to refer to DS2 as, Dark Souls 2, where I'm thinking, oh, it's Dead Space 2, right? That kind of thing, so to speak. So I'm very interested to know what the division here is. If assault rifle is in fact the actual correct terminology, or if it is Armalite rifle like I was led to believe. So if you have any insight into that, I would be very, very happy to read through that and make sure that I'm calling it by the correct thing. Because as far as I'm aware at this point in time, it is Armalite because it's an Armalite platform.
Cartridges. This meant that the 9-shot pistol just couldn't keep up.
No.
The pistol was officially retired upon the adoption of the Beretta M9 pistol in 1984.
I do love me some good Beretta M9. Oh boy, it do be spicy. It do be heavy too.
1 year short of its diamond anniversary at 74 years. Although the US Marine Corps continued to use the pistol all the way up into the 1990s, seeing action in the Gulf War, basically all of them had been phased out by the end of the decade. Although some Special Forces troops choose to use it as their sidearm, the days of every troop carrying the M1911 are behind us.
I mean, at that point, I guess it's the tool for the job, I guess, or the tool for the situation. I mean, it's awesome that you see Special Forces just going, no, we want that. We want the 1911. Like there's some really cool facet in that. Absolutely. But I think it does go down to more of the volume of fire thing we were talking about earlier. It's easier to, 1, carry, easier to 2, manufacture, 3, to utilize. something like 9mm versus 45 ACP, which, as we discussed, was 7+1, then 8+1, and versus something that's like 14+1. And especially because of how many advancements 9mm has made over the years, to, once again, kind of negligible difference, but really it's personal preference, which, as we see some special forces units like the 1911, mad respect.
Despite being out of service for over 30 years, the Colt M1911 is still a staple of firearms enthusiasts,
Yes.
with Colt themselves still selling over 10,000 of them a year and dozens of other manufacturers taking advantage of a century-old design that is well out of copy protection. You'll find one on nearly every firing range in the world. From historical...
Well, we even have, what is it? Is it the 2011 series? God, those things are spendy, though. I mean... So when you look at stuff, I mean, like, so on the higher end, you're starting to look at like 3K. And someone in chats can be like, Kip, I want you to know, my pistol cost me 15 grand. And I'll be like, yeah, I believe it. Yeah, there's stuff out there that will cost that much. What is it? Ada Wong's ammo box from Resident Evil 6. I think that's the Ruger MP9. Was it like 40 grand at auction? Absolutely, they get up there. I'm not discounting that. My starting to get spendy territory as soon as we cross that 3 grand threshold. So like the Scar, right? About 4 grand, little spendy for me. When you start getting into the FAL, especially when it's not a full metal, it's a polymer FAL, right? Little spendy for me. So you get to like a $3,300, $3,500 2011, and sure, it's lightweight. Sure, it feels like it's cool. It feels dynamic. It's just, I don't know, it's not heavy enough for me. I much prefer the 1911 personally, but I am also, by self-admit, it's an internet dingus. Take that as you will.
replicas meant to emulate the sidearms taken into battle by soldiers in World War II, to high-end customs made for elite competition.
Yes.
The M1911 is one of the best-selling weapons of all time. It has seen particular favor in some circles of the competition target shooters due to its incredible accuracy. Well over a century after it was first adopted, it is still hard to outmatch it shot for shot. Colt's Gold Cup line of pistols still utilizes John Browning's design with precious little in the way of innovation, and holds a prime space as one of the world's premier competition firearms.
I had no idea this was even a series. I had no idea this existed. This is kind of cool.
Before the M1911, the world was a wild west of revolvers and a few semi-automatics that were just as likely to jam as they were to fire. After the M1911, semi-automatics were the norm and not the exception. If you take a look at basically any handgun released after its adoption before World War I, you can see the fingerprints of this incredible weapon in almost every single design. From the
100%.
compact German Walther P38 to the massive and overbuilt Desert Eagle, the Colt M1911 has established the design language for what a handgun should be.
The Desert Eagle for me is just a little too big. It's ironic because I say I like big, I like heavy, I like a brick, but I look at I have tried to like the Deagle. I've really tried. It is just, I don't know. It's bulky to the point of almost unwieldy for me as somebody with larger hands. So, I mean, I'd be very, I guess I'm curious. What are your thoughts on the Desert Eagle? What are your thoughts on, I guess it's application? What are your thoughts on its usage as well as ammo cost, especially a 50A model? I'd be very interested.
In the modern world. We mentioned earlier that we did a video about the M2. You should definitely check that out as well. I'm going to link to it on the screen now. And thank you for watching.
This was really good. So, how we're going
Thanks again to Crossout for sponsoring today's video. Remember, you can try Crossout's free-to-play game by visiting my unique URL, exo.link/exo.
What is a saturation?
Very unique URL. There is a link in the description below for your convenience, and you'll get some exclusive in-game bonuses. Go check them out, and thanks for watching.
Never really played Crossout. I'm curious how it is. So, if you have not checked out or even heard of Simon Whistler before this, excellent creator. I'm not paid to say this. I'm not affiliated with Simon Whistler in any way. I wanted to take kind of a older, iconic video, if you will, give my thoughts on it, give my reaction to it, and really just expose, an audience to Simon Whistler, because Simon Whistler he puts out a lot of work. I mean, he is at 13 to 15 channels last I checked. This man works, and I actually take a lot of my channel model out, what I want to do after him. So he's very, very on point. The difference is he also has writers and stuff and is, actually popular. which thank you for watching. No, if you haven't seen Simon Whistler before, definitely go ahead and check him out. He's an awesome creator. He puts out a lot of cool stuff. He's got many channels for a lot of different, fan bases and viewerships. You have Side Project, which is this for things along this nature. You have mega projects, big buildings, big projects, etc. And, Casual Criminalist, if you kind of like podcast, kind of like true crime documentary style kind of thing. We also have Into the Shadows, which biographics, biographics was kind of like we're covering historical, people from history. We're covering Pol Pot. We're covering Gandhi, etc. Geographics is kind of like we're covering Uralsk 7, the RLC, things like that. And then we have Into the Shadows, which kind of encompasses some of those ideas in a more modernized and focused format. I think we had Ryerson on Into the Shadows potentially at one point in time. And I think Warographics is one of his newer ones that actually does cover content that I am not able to cover on YouTube, because that does actually cover modern conflicts and modern events, if you will, if you catch my meaning on that. So if you have not, and you're looking for an amazing person on the platform, and even other platforms that he's on, definitely go check out Simon Whistler. Awesome person, awesome individual. And let me know what you thought of this. Did you think that this was awesome? Did you think that this was a really neat reaction? Did you not know Simon Whistler before and you're going to go check him out? Did you know about Simon Whistler before, but just kind of not knowing the whole scope of what he did? Let me know in the comment section. As always, please be civil. We're going to see how copyright works on this, because I've been dealing with a lot of copyright, and I want to make sure. I think I did reach out to Simon Whistler at one point in time via email, and, people busy, people be adults, people be busy. And worst case scenario, if Simon Whistler doesn't want a reaction, I will have to take this down, but I'm more than willing to do that to accommodate other creators. That is all for this time. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.